Can we talk for a minute about our Integrating Heart and Mind workshop?
Absolutely. I'm excited. It's coming up in the fall of 2024.
I'm so excited. We changed the format to make it more accessible to people with like work schedules and personal schedules. And so this time we're going to do it 3 hours on a Friday afternoon or evening, depending on where you're at, and 5 hours on Saturday for 2 different weeks in September.
Yeah, it's so great. Like if you're finding yourself stuck in like sticky bad patterns or having communication issues or something like that, or if you want to just like get closer and trust yourself or your partner more, this is the workshop for you.
Yeah, and individuals are welcome, couples are welcome. If you're interested in really thinking through how to serve yourself well inside of your relationships, then we've built a workshop that will support you in finding the ways that are just right for you.
To sign up, head over to our website at whydoesmypartner.com/events.
We hope you'll join us. Welcome to the Why Doesn't My Partner podcast.
I'm Jules.
I'm Vicky.
And I'm Rebecca. We're your hosts. We're also couples therapists and messy humans bumbling through our own relationships every day.
We met through our training and practice of relational life therapy. Between us, we have more than 40 years of experience holding hard relational questions with our clients. We're going to bring those questions here.
And together, we're going to take a stab at answering those questions. This podcast is not a substitute for therapy. If something you hear in this episode stirs something deep within you about your relationship, reach out to a couples therapist in your area.
We'd also love to hear your questions, so don't forget to go over to whydoesmypartner.com and leave us a question of your own. Here's today's question.
Why does my partner's past bother me?
We have a good one today. Why does my partner's past bother me?
There are layers in this question.
There are.
I think maybe it would be helpful for us to unblend some of the layers.
Right. Well, first, I think the first layer is that, and this is kind of a universal one to me. Why does my partner's past bother me? There's nothing about my partner's past. If it's truly past, right? If that's really the question, if it's truly past, there's nothing about it that's actually happening right now. So the only reason it's bothering you is because of the story you're telling yourself about it.
Yes.
So there's not a question that if it's bothering you, you are telling yourself a very particular kind of story about it. But what kind of story?
What kind of story?
Like
Yes.
what one kind of story I can think of is you're telling yourself a story about comparison.
Mm-hmm. So that
Like you're
comparing.
comparing. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, you're comparing yourself to perhaps a past partner of your
Yes.
partners.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're comparing yourself and disturbed, it's likely because you're feeling less than or that you don't compare. And that's an insecurity.
Right. And it could even be that you grew up with a parent who compares or around a lot of friends who compared a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So it may just be that it is habitual and you learned it. I love that quote from Theodore Roosevelt. He said, "Comparison is the thief of joy."
Mm-hmm. Ain't that the truth?
Yeah. So, and social media certainly has loaded us up with lots of that. So we live in a culture, I think, that is pretty comparison heavy.
Yeah.
And so I'm not surprised when people tell themselves stories about that. And I get this little I don't know, it's an achy feeling right at the edge of my heart as it touches my sternum about it, really, because I think that there's so much beauty in the diversity of our world, and there's beauty in how you're different from people your partner was with in the past, and there's beauty in how you're the same, and there's beauty in you, and don't forget that in the face of comparison.
Well said, Jules.
That was so beautifully said. Oh.
I'm thinking a little into this more. In addition to what you're talking about here, I'm thinking about the piece you mentioned about our society and just how much we're all conditioned to assimilate into this kind of
Same as.
well, it is and it isn't, right? It's like we're not really getting to the place where like we're all worthy.
Right.
We're
Not
getting
same
to
as
the
with
right.
health.
So it's not same as in a healthy way,
Not
but
in a
it's
healthy
like,
way.
you know, I need to straighten my hair and get my skin to
Yes.
look a certain way and flatten my belly and
That kind
gain
of
these
same
great big
as.
muscles and have a certain car and like that kind of, right?
Yeah.
And all this external stuff that really just kind of contributes to my looking at myself and having this like inner critique all the time.
And again, feeling
Less
I don't
than.
like the word that I said earlier, the insecurity, just feeling the less than, the I don't measure up. That's more than one word. That's probably why I was stumped. But it is.
I love that phrase.
Yeah. And so the comparison is me, Rebecca, with all those examples you just gave of like, and yet here's yet another way that I don't measure up. And here's another way that I don't measure up. And what at the beginning you guys had said too, the different layers of this question, it's so interesting to me. I'm outing myself honestly that when I heard this question, why does my partner's past bother me? My mind only went into one direction, which was past partners and those relationships. As in sexual and relationships. And there are a lot of other things in someone's past that may be at play when we talk about the layers. So maybe other things that actually aren't even about the comparisons. It's just, is it?
Oh yeah. I could be telling myself a story about maybe what do some of the past behaviors indicate. So it could like show up like yellow flags or red flags, maybe. Yeah.
And some of those knowings are so important, right? Because for so many different reasons, we may have these stories that kind of run through our beings, run through our souls. Some of them may even have been passed down generationally. And
some of them are right.
Some of them are right.
And it's not for me to say what's right for you.
Right.
It's only for you to say what's right for you.
And some of them are they like we need to sit with them to figure them out. Each individual, we need to sit with them.
So you could be telling yourself a story like, well, is this person's value system aligned enough with mine because of this past? Or is this, you could be having questions about like, oh, does this indicate some danger in the future? And I think that's worth, if you're having those kind of questions, I really want to encourage you to really take your time and reflect and think about, hey, is this something my inner wisdom is really trying to tell me about this that's super important for me? Or is it that I'm telling myself scary stories, to keep myself from being vulnerable or something?
Right. And to Jules, what you were saying, to trust that, tune in to yourself, to your own perspective, trust what your gut is saying, and don't stay in I don't want to say bad. Don't stay in a relationship that you're seeing red flags because you're afraid of the grief of the breakup. You have to take that step. And if this is the case, right, and if it's true for you, then you end it and you deal with your pain and your grief, rather than the avoidance of it.
Yep, we're back at grief again.
We always get back there, don't we?
We do. Welcome to our podcast about relationships where you will face grief
on a regular basis.
All right. So what's the skill here? The skill is a deeper listening.
I think the skill's twofold because I think it's different for the comparison version versus the piece around
red flags.
Red flags.
Red
like
flags,
what
yellow
if it
flags.
is? What if it really is? Like it could be. I don't know. I'm not in your life. I don't live with you day to day. So for the comparison one, I have your skill. It is radical self-love, baby.
I love when
and
you
I
talk
am
about
borrowing
this one.
that language, right? I'm borrowing that
Sonia
language.
Renee Taylor.
Sonia Renee Taylor. She is amazing. If you don't know her, read her. She wrote The Body Is Not an Apology. She is a poet and an activist. She's amazing. And radical self-love is the answer to comparison.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And the more you can be in that space with you, the more abundant you will know that love is. And the more you can be in that space with you, that abundance will flow out of you towards people around you. So if you're in a space where you tend to tell yourself stories about comparison and put yourself in a less than position in those stories, radical self-love is your answer. And that is a practice, that is a skill, and that is a practice. So one skill, I'm enough and I matter. Touch your heart right now with your hand and say it. Send that message in. I see you, heart. I am enough and I matter.
I want to add on to that.
Yeah.
I'm enough and I matter despite all my imperfections.
Yeah.
I have worth because I was born.
Yep, exactly.
I tell myself that every morning.
Mm-hmm.
I love what's happening right now because I think you guys are right. We have to find the language that sends that tuning fork of resonance in the middle of our own system. So what I want you guys at home to do is to take this potpourri we just threw out there and start writing. If this is your journey, if you need radical self-love in your life, you do not have this. Cool. No problem. Most of us don't. Don't worry about that. But start writing. What is your phrase? Right? Start writing different versions of it. And when you hit the one that you hit, and you'll know it, write it on a Post-it and stick it on your bathroom mirror and read it every single day. It is a skill and it is a practice. And unless you do it, you will not change your neural networks. So skill, practice becomes state.
There's a ritualization in there that, a ritualization that one can make up for themselves, a ritualization that I believe ritual has this really intense and beautiful purpose of helping to ground us into ourselves. Right. And so you could borrow rituals that others have, but really when we create rituals for ourselves.
Yeah, you can borrow it and model it and just do that, or you can create it out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And both are great.
Yeah. And then the second skill is the sitting with, right? The sitting with kind of like, what are those flags that are showing up for me? What are those stories? How much do I need to know about them? And Jules, I think you said this before we started recording, but this piece about your heart brain and your belly brain.
Yeah.
You want to talk into that a little?
Yeah. This has a lot to do with trusting your inner wisdom. So something I like to do when I'm sitting with one of these kinds of stories that I may be projecting, it may be really about fear of my own vulnerability, or it may be about fear of getting, closer with my partner. And I tell myself a story of danger to kind of keep him at arm's length, right? But I could also be telling myself a real story that is very grounded in reality, and that my gut brain and my heart brain are telling me, wake up and pay attention to this one, because maybe our value systems aren't aligned, or maybe we are in a dangerous space. So having been in a relationship, I have been in a romantic relationship. It was a dangerous space. And I was not able at that time in my life to listen to my heart brain and my belly brain. And had I been, I probably would have paid attention to red flags and walked a lot earlier than I did. So I don't want to discount those. So here's what we do is we just pay attention to the inner visceral space in our body. And we just ask, okay, what's up? If you stopped telling me this story, what are you afraid might happen? And you'll get your answer.
What a beautiful place to land,
Mhm.
even though it brings us back to grief again.
It might.
Mhm.
It might bring you to the fear of being closer, and it might bring you to grief. It may be, I love how you said it, Vicky, that we don't stay in a space with red flags all over the place to avoid the sadness of breaking up.
Mhm.
The avoidance of that grief.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And it will hurt. I mean, I guess it might not if you don't really care about the relationship, but if you're asking the question, you probably do care about the relationship and you feel this inner conflict and you'll be sad.
Of course.
Mhm.
Well, there's love there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Even if it's not, it could be not even dangerous. I'm talking about the dangerous ones, but it could just be, wow, my whole system knows our values are so far out of alignment. We're going to run into trouble down the road. That doesn't mean there's not love there,
Correct. Right.
but it still may not be right for you.
Yeah.
So if you're telling yourself a story about somebody's past that's more like sending danger signals or like something's really off here signals instead of comparison signals, listen inside
Mm-hmm.
and just ask your inner wisdom to show you what it's afraid of.
So we'll see you again next time.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
That wraps up this week's episode. Join us again next week for another Why Does My Partner?
We hope that you continue to listen wherever you get your audio and that you'll follow the show.
To go deeper, join us at our boot camp. You'll find the next date at whydoesmypartner.com.
Did you know you could ask us your question?
Your questions are relational gold.
Go to whydoesmypartner.com to either write in or record your question for a future episode.